Good morning and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu to all of you there, my AQRA family at the Subic Bay right now. Thank you very much for having me as your plenary speaker for this year in our third Asian Qualitative Research Conference. Again, I am very much thankful to all of the Secretariat of AQRA for having me in this prestigious affair. Now, as much as I would like to be with you this year, I did not make it there at Subic because of so many circumstances that I cannot live here in our university. Nonetheless, I am very much thankful that I am still with you, though it is virtual. We will be having our sharing here via video, and hopefully after this video we will be able to have the question and answer later. Now, I would like to share with you the plight of the Marawi City constituents, the people who are originally from Marawi City, who were actually victims or survivors of the May 23, 2017 tremor. That attack made by the militants who are actually found in the news for several days and for several months at the so-called Marawi siege. There were different parts of the Islamic city of Marawi which we think and we really thought of as a well-orchestrated attack of this ISIS-inspired Maoti group. Now, when they attacked the city, our people had no choice but actually leave Marawi city at that particular day, and especially on the second day, because of the memories of martial law in the 70s. When our president, the president of the Philippines, our President Duterte, declared that martial law on the 23rd of May, many of our people were actually having that fear that if they will not leave Marawi City, they will be having a lot of problems. And then, of course, with all of the attacks and the firings, and of course the situation of the Morenos at that particular day and particular evening, there were even burning of schools, there were even burning of institutions. Our people of Marawi, and the Marawi residents to be specific, had that problem and had that nervousness that if they stay in the city, they might be trapped and be victims of the so-called bombings. So the only option of our people is to leave Marawi City on the 24th. In fact, there was a so-called exodus of people from Marawi City down to Iligan City. Some of them stopped over in Sagyaran in order to be IDPs in Sagyaran. Others continued their travel to Iligan City. In my case, I had to travel from Marawi City to Iligan City, thinking that after 3 days, the so-called siege or attack will be done or will be ended because of maybe an internal arrangements or internal mediation of the people of Marawi and the leaders of Marawi would do. But to our surprise, it went on to weeks, months, and even this coming May is our first year of this entire Marawi crisis. And in fact, we don't even know what will come next to this. So this is really the situation right now. And as to this project or this sharing that I will be having with you, I entitled it The Tale of Marawi City, because there were so many issues arising from the different experiences of the Marawi City crisis survivors. Just to give you a backgrounder, I and my colleagues here at Marawi City, with the help of Oxfam sa Pilipinas and also the Al Mujadala Development Foundation, actually helped us to record at least a gender snapshot of what actually happened to the people of Marawi. and while they are in the evacuation centers and also in the different parts of the city or even in the different parts of the country. We call ourselves the internally displaced individuals from Marawi City on the day of May 24, 2017, because a lot of us actually moved on the following day, and then others moved just few days after the second day. Now, with the Marawi clash, the disaster response update from day to day and from time to time, the DSWD, or the Department of Social Welfare and Development of this country, especially the Region 12 and the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, had that very specific update every week, almost in those first few days of the Marawi clash. And with their help, they were able to come up with the status of internally displaced persons and families in the country. As of July 2017, at 7 p.m., the data that was shown to us, and probably showing in your screen right now, there were 101,013 families. Or, to be specific, there are 471,224 persons who are actually displaced as of July 2017. And with that displacement, interestingly, there are only 87 evacuation centers all over the country, specifically to nearby cities like Iligan City, Cagayan de Oro, and also to different municipalities around Lanao Norte and Lanao Sur. And of these, only 4,277 families were actually housed in these 87 evacuation centers. Now, where are the others, other families? In fact, in the data, there were, out of the 101,000 families, the 85,312 families were actually outside the evacuation centers, and we call them home-based evacuees, or the home-based IDPs. These home-based IDPs are either in their relatives or their host families, or even renting different hotels or different establishments such as apartels or apartments all over Mindanao at that particular time. And it's approximated to 387,118 persons. So if you could just see that, there were really that difference of the people we can serve in the evacuation centers and in outside EZs. That's why I'm very thankful to our AQRA family, because when I launched the call for help and the call for support from our friends, there were so many friends who helped us, and one is our AQRA family. Thank you very much for helping us. Your contribution actually came in, and we had our project with the Lanao Council. Our project was actually to augment and at least help those who are not in the evacuation centers only. In fact, we, as much as possible, we had that help for the spontaneous settlements. The spontaneous settlements are like madrasas or other schools within Iligan City, which were turned into evacuation centers, meaning these are not DSWD sanctioned ECs, but they were there to be able to survive and stay there because they didn't have money to rent, for example, and they don't have relatives to stay to or stay with. So when that particular day came and your support came, we see to it that we were able to reach out to different families outside. The issue that I would like to share with you today, meaning the project that I would like to share with you today, is actually the project of Marawi City Gender Snapshot that was helped or supported by the Oxfam sa Pilipinas, and of course the Al-Mujadila Development Foundation, with the help also of the UNIFIL Women. We actually looked into the issues in the ground for the first 6 months of the Marawi crisis. This is more specifically on the issue that was faced by those who are at the ECs and the home-based and also the home-based IDPs. Now, on the first 6 months, one of the salient issues that actually came up is the water, sanitation, and hygiene, or we call this the WASH cluster. Some women of this particular experience, during at the ECs at the home base, some women do the fetching of water, and they had to endure the queue inside the evacuation center because for them to have that so-called assistance from or water assistance from the providers. And on the first few days, the access was actually very difficult because the ICRC or the Red Cross would have to bring water to the different areas of the evacuation centers in order to help these women. And then another issue that came out as far as the WASH cluster is concerned is the access to toilets. There were problems with the access of toilets, the ventilation, the lights, and also other supplies for women and the elderly. In fact, the sharing of the elderly, they said that they had a difficulty going to the toilets because it was really too dark, and in the evening they had to be escorted in order for them to get to the toilet. And for the food security, a lot of the home-based until today did not have that access to food supplies from the DSWD. And in the first 6 months, the food supply was never enough. It was never enough for our people because the increase of people coming in and out of the ECs are actually getting larger each day. In fact, on the first day, there were only very few ECs, but eventually they come up to the 87 ECs. And then, of course, as time goes, and because it is a one-size-fits-all kind of DSWD provision, they had that so-called food, saturation. The people were actually saturated with the kind of food that was given to them by the DSWD. So it was difficult for them to find another or other types of food. Now, other issues came in, such as livelihood and cash. Both men, women, the young and the old had problems, and they needed livelihood so bad. So badly in the sense that they would want livelihood to come in because they wanted to have the means to buy another kind of food. And of course, there was that intervention by the DSWD called Cash for Work, but it was not enough, and it was not open or always provided to women. And regarding the livelihood programs, not all the livelihood programs were not actually given to all types of IDPs, but mainly they give it to IDPs at the ECs, at the evacuation centers, and not much on the home-based IDPs. Another kind of issue is the so-called gender-based violence. This is quite alarming because young men and women are the most vulnerable to violence during displacements, and there was no proper violence reporting in the evacuation centers. Among home-based also, home-based IDPs, there were no proper reporting regarding their home-based or EC gender-based violence. And then there were actually reports on issues, and even it was broadcasted on television that there were marriages at the evacuation center. And what is alarming there is that there are even early marriages that are happening in the evacuation centers and among home-based IDPs because they wanted to get out of the evacuation center. And the only way, one of the resorts of these parents is to allow their children to get married to locals in the particular homes, no, or areas where they have stayed in order for them, for their children to be there. But the problem is sometimes the women are too young, or the men are too young, or sometimes the other way around. They were actually forced, no, in order to, or they had to succumb to forced marriages. And there was some physical violence actually against children and wives, but these were not reported in the Philippine National Police and and to the BPATs. In fact, there was an incident where it was narrated to us by one of our key informants, where they said that their parents were actually doing some violence against them, and they had to run away in order for them not to feel afraid of what is happening to them. Then, of course, aside from that, there is this so-called sexual and reproductive health service issues, no? And the access to this is really very difficult for the IDPs. In fact, there were IDPs who confirmed that most of them do not have regular visits to doctors, no, unless they are pregnant. No? And some IDPs hesitate to practice family planning methods. So most of them, if they did not succumb to that, and if they are really that fertile, many of them get pregnant in the midst of the crisis. And others also confirmed that they had to endure whatever is being provided to them by the DSWD or the medical help. And then another issue, the second to the last issue that I would like to share with you, is the shelter issue. Now, most of the IDPs who left in the ECs are from the Marawi main battle area, or we call it as the ground zero. The ground zero, since it is the main battle area or the most affected area, a lot of our people did not have the chance to go back. In fact, with these new developments, the only remaining barangay that was, or barangays that were left untouched and inhabited by our people is the 24 barangays inside the MAA, or the most affected area. Now, women and men have actually different privacy needs as they were sheltered in these ECs and in the home base. There were problems with proper ventilation, and also it was too hot in the different tent cities. No? And of course, most of those who owned the houses in Marawi City did not have their land titles. And that's quite alarming, because with the problem these days, you know, of giving back the lot or the land there at Marawi City, if you don't have the land title, you will never have the chance to be back in your own place if you don't have that evidence to show. Unless otherwise you are being marked or known to your barangay already. Now, other things in terms of shelter is the so-called renting. You know, there are some of our Marawi residents who are just there renting houses, but they would become victims. And then for some, you know, home-based IDPs, to them, they feel that living with their host families is actually too much for such a long time. So they would love to be outside their host families as much as possible. And of course, some of our IDPs voiced out that they need a lot of preparations, and they need some income in order for the reparation of their lost properties. So the last issue that I would like to share with you is on education. This is where our part as people of the academia and as researchers, the education issue of the Marawi IDPs is really alarming, because some were actually left in the 10 cities having no continued education, especially the young IDPs. they were afraid of bringing their children to school, because some of our schools, actually, especially in Iligan City, they were tagging the children as ISIS kids, no? Or they were being bullied with so many words, no? That were addressed, no? To even bad words were actually given, or name callings, no? Were actually given to these young children. And of course, our IDPs do not have that means to support the schooling of their children. So these are just some of the many issues that we got from the field, but because of the given time that we were able to access during the focus group discussions that we've had in the 3 municipalities, including 1 city, that is in Pantar, Sagyaran, and Balui municipalities, and of course Iligan City, we had no chance to elaborately get the different issues, no, that may be attached to it. But on the shelter aspect, generally, I just would like to mention that among the culturally insensitive issues that were experienced by our IDPs is the so-called conjugal rooms, no? Because the conjugal rooms is something that is not acceptable to a lot of Muslims, especially to women, because it may be a means or a way for men to abuse women. And there are also instances where they had that shame in them that they could not bear letting their population or letting their co-IDPs in the ECs to know that they are going to use the conjugal room. So it was really very insensitive. In other words, there are things to be done. The issues that we have actually found out, hopefully we would be publishing this one and we will share it with you in the next AQRA once this gender snapshot is being published, because we are on the process of finalizing the gender snapshot layout. And once this is published already, we will be giving you a copy, promise, just to give you an idea of what really was and how the Marawi people got through this incidents. And of course, I'd like to share to you my cultural realization aside from that conjugal room. To me, I would like to say that one size fits all of the Philippine response to disaster, either it is natural disaster or man-made disaster, a one size fits all strategy will never work. So another thing is that the Maranaos generally are very shy. We live in this culture of shame. No? Our culture of shame is really high that we cannot afford to allow ourselves to succumb to, for instance, being in a conjugal room or being at the ECs easily. In fact, that showed in our statistics. That's the reason why a lot of our Maranao people are living outside the evacuation centers, because they cannot afford to live in the ECs where everyone sees everyone. All right. So they respect privacy, and of course there are families who cannot really afford to to bear, no, that they could be seen by other families. So in fact, really, this culture of shame, no, is really very high. And I'm very thankful that AQRA was able to help along that line. You were able to help us in the process of helping those who are outside the ECs, because they're the victims of this so-called crisis, and they did not have the chance to of course recuperate very soon. So thank you to my AQRA family for helping us through the Ranao Council Ugup, or the HELP program. I'll show you the video right after this presentation. And another thing is that in the present status of the Marawi crisis survivors, the Kambalingan program for all safe areas of Marawi City were actually given back to our Marawi residents. And there were transition and temporary shelters that were given to our IDP, especially at the Sangunsungan area. However, there are still multiple displacement issues for those IDPs from Iligan City because they were no longer allowed by the Iligan City to stay there further, so they had to be moved to the Sarimanok evacuation center here at Marawi City. And lastly, the Kambisita program, which is the last part, which is the visitation of the homes these days. Again, we hope to continue this support to our Maranao IDPs, and we hope to continue supporting our people of Marawi. Thank you very much once again to all of my AQRA family out there. Thank you.